Welcome to Head Start, the podcast for race directors and the business of putting on races. If I told you race marketing, what kinds of things come to mind? Facebook ads, maybe? Maybe Google ads? But what about your race website? Is that optimized for search engines? When people search Google for your race, or even more importantly, for a race like your race to enter, is your race website the one they find at the top of Google search results? Today, we're going to be talking about SEO, a huge missed opportunity to get more qualified people to discover your race on Google. And why is this so important? Well, A, because it's free, B, because it can get you tons of traffic and potential participants, and C, because very few people are doing it as well as it can be done. And that's where the opportunity lies for you. My guest on today's episode, Corey Jenneman, knows a bit about SEO, having spent countless hours ranking his awesome race listing site, runguides.com, to the top of Google search results pages. And as you'll see, Corey loves geeking over keywords and structured data and the like, as do I, to be honest. So stick with us for a fun-filled SEO chat. Before we go into all that though, a quick shout out to our podcast sponsor, Give Sign Up, Run Sign Up, the leading all-in-one technology solution for endurance and fundraising events. More than 22,000 in-person, virtual, and hybrid events use Give Sign Up, Run Sign Up's free and integrated solution to save time, grow their events, and raise more. Many thanks to our friends at Give Sign Up, Run Sign Up for supporting our podcast. And if you want to know more about amazing technology that can transform every aspect of your next race, take a minute to visit runsignup.com. That's runsignup.com. If you enjoy the podcast, make sure to subscribe on your favorite player. And if you have a minute, consider leaving us a review. We really appreciate any feedback you may have to offer. Okay, now let's get into this amazing episode. Corey, welcome to the podcast.
Panos, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on. How are things in Vancouver?
Yeah, they're pretty good. I actually had a very exciting day yesterday. I found a $10 bill on the ground in the parking lot. So this is a big week.
Wow.
So far, right?
Big win, $10 up.
$10 up. When do you ever find money on the ground? And when you do, when do you ever find a substantial amount like $10?
I know. You know, if my 5-year-old ever found like $10 on the ground, he wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, you'd be rich.
He came back the other day with like his grandparents, I think, gave him like something to buy a toy or something.
Yeah.
And he thought it was just a picture, like the banknote. He couldn't recognize what it was. So thank God we're a little bit more old school than that, and we can, you know, we can pick up a $10 note when we see it.
Exactly. We know what's going on.
So you are the managing partner at Run Guides Media.
That's correct.
So tell us a little bit about Run Guides. I'm sure some of the listeners, particularly US-based and Canada-based listeners, would know a little bit about runguides.com at least. But tell us a little bit about like the whole company, what you guys do for races and race directors.
Yeah, so I'm the managing partner, the co-founder of Run Guides Media, and our main property is our website, runguides.com, which helps people find running races across North America. And soon, actually, we're going to be opening up another couple international regions in the next quarter, so I'm pretty excited about that. But I mean, that's the main part of the business. It's just nice and simple, right? We help people find runs.
So basically, you're like, I think what most people would call like a race calendar, like a race listing site.
Exactly. Yep. We're a directory of all the races happening. We have millions of runners coming to the site every year, looking for events, trying to find their next race. And we work with race directors to help them connect with those runners.
Exactly. And actually, I would say for people listening that Run Guides, in my opinion at least, is one of the better race calendar sites out there. I mean, it looks great. It has a ton of visitors. It's very easy to just put your race up there. So everyone listening in, just take a note, visit runguides.com and see if your race is up there, claim it or post it there. And that's just free traffic. And actually, we'll be going into race calendars a little bit further later in the podcast when we discuss backlinks and stuff like that. So today, We're going to be talking about SEO. Me and you were having a call the other day, like just catching up on things. And I was looking for someone to have an SEO chat with. And it just occurred to me that with all the work you have been doing with Run Guides, like you're an obvious person, and actually you are after we discussed it, who would know quite a lot about SEO, because essentially running runguides.com is like running like hundreds and thousands of little mini race websites, right?
To some level it is. And with us, I mean, I think we're on pace for next year. We'll do like 4.5 to 6 million visits, and it's 90% organic Google search. Like, we don't pay for any ads or anything. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. And the core of what we do is search engine optimization. It's also quite fun because I believe you and I met due to me doing some SEO work. I was doing some backlink building, and that's how you and I connected initially. When was it? A few years ago, when I found that you were linking to some of the other similar sites, some of the other directories, and I went, oh, hey, can we get Run Guides up on Race Director HQ? And here we are now.
Exactly. So your stuff. I think that that has to be said. And also, you're also, I think, quite passionate about SEO. When we're talking about this, like, it's, and I think it's one of those areas, SEO. I was talking to Tina Wilmot from Endurance Sportswire like a few weeks back. Another great site with very queued on SEO. And
great site. I've subscribed to their email list. Sorry, go on.
Exactly. No, it's like everyone in this industry subscribes to that. And SEO, it strikes me like it's the kind of thing that it's a bit of a rabbit hole. Once people get involved in it, it's something that they get really passionate about, and like they keep on optimizing down to the very last fine kind of like detail.
For sure. And I think too, it's something that sometimes can be a little bit vague or a little bit intimidating because there are some technical aspects to it. But at the end of the day, the core of SEO, in my opinion at least, is your site useful to whatever that query is that person happens to be typing in. And there are some really easy things you can do to help your site be really useful for those queries and give you a great chance of ranking really well for them.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and one that we should jump straight into actually in a minute, because that pretty much captures everything anyone needs to know about SEO at a high level, I think. So, but for people who are not familiar with even the term of SEO, can you give us like a quick explanation of what SEO is about, particularly as it pertains to race directors and race websites?
For sure. I mean, SEO, the definition of it is search engine optimization, and it's really about making your site rank really well in the search engines for very specific keyword terms. And again, I'm going to keep going back to this. It's about making your site a useful tool for people when they're searching for those specific keywords. For a race director and for events in particular, I always kind of see two levels to it. Your first level is my site ranking for the actual branded keywords? By that I mean, if you're the Vancouver Marathon, is your site ranking really well for Vancouver Marathon and all the other major keywords that go along with that? The people are looking for results, photos, course, like all of that stuff. Your site should be ranking number one for all of those, right? And then on the second level, I always see it as a tool for race directors to get their event in front of people who are actively looking for races. And then, of course, there are a number of different ways that we'll get into around that. So how can you put your race in front of people who are in that discovery mode, who are either looking at other websites or Googling around? And yeah, that's how I see it most applicable to events.
And actually, yeah, I think that's correct. And actually, I would say of those two, the one that's most important and also probably most overlooked by race directors is the second category, right? Because, the branded thing, you're in a pretty dire spot if you can't get your Vancouver Marathon website to rank for Vancouver Marathon, right? I mean, you should be doing things actively pretty badly to not get there, right? I mean, Google is going to figure it out whether, you have technical SEO or all the stuff we're going to get into. So that is the easy bit. The most difficult bit, and one probably that's not very central to people's awareness, is ranking for terms like, fast marathons in BC, right? So that kind of thing, which actually is your target audience. They're not looking for Vancouver Marathon, but they're exactly the kind of audience who also through their query have expressed the intent to find a site like the Vancouver Marathon site, right?
Exactly. And I mean, like, if you look again at search intent, right? Someone who is searching for your branded keywords, Vancouver Marathon results, Vancouver Marathon 2022, that person already kind of knows what they're looking for and they're going to find you. Now, when you look at these other searches, someone who's searching for fast marathon in May, they've got their wallet out. They're looking to register. And how can you help them find you? And I think that's what we'll get into today.
Exactly. And that is what I think technically is called search intent, right? Is that you can understand from the query when someone types in, for instance, as you said, fast marathons in May, that someone who's looking, they're not like fooling around or doing a poll for marathons in May. They're actually looking for a fast marathon to do specifically in May. And if you get your website in front of that kind of person, there's a good chance that they might register for your event. And that's exactly the kind of query you're going to go after.
Yep, absolutely. They might register. They might, you also give them an opportunity to find your site and hopefully get on your email list, which is going to be one of your highest converting marketing tools as a race director as well.
So, I was looking actually doing some research for this episode. I was looking at Run Signup's Race Trends report, which is a very, very helpful report sort of capturing what's happening with Run Sign Up events, which of course are a large percentage of the market. And I saw there that actually organic search accounted back in 2019, which was, I suppose, the last normal year we've had so far. It accounted for 30% of inbound traffic to Run Sign Up registration pages, which are like the runguides.com pages. They're like, mini websites essentially, right? They describe the event and everything, which is quite a lot, 30%, particularly if you compare it to the only higher channel of traffic, which is referral through race calendars, etc., which is a similar type of traffic. And what's surprising to me is that although 30% of traffic to race websites comes from Google, you very rarely hear people, even in our group on Facebook, discuss organic traffic and SEO as something that they'll need, that they would like to focus on as part of their marketing strategy. It's just not on people's radar. Do you get that?
Yeah, I do to some degree. And I think, again, it can be a little bit of a, where do I start? What are some easy things that I can do? It can be vague for a race, right? Hey, I'm ranking well for my race keywords. All right, where do I go? Where do I go from here? That, and I mean, some of this stuff is, say, looking at backlinking when we get into that, which is a fantastic thing that people should be doing, going out and building backlinks. You have to do that. It takes effort, long effort over time, right? And you just have to be consistent at it and chip away at it. And it will eventually pay dividends for you. So that could be why.
No, I think that's definitely one. I mean, everything we're going to be discussing today, SEO, all of this stuff, and you know it better than anyone. You're playing the long game, right? It's not like a Facebook ad or something, which, you turn on today and you see a click in the next minute. It's something that you work on. The soonest you'll see results would be, in the earliest in like a few months, right? 2-3 months for things to kick in. And then you'll need to be on top of things, like Google's own algorithms change a little bit. Like you'll need to be doing little tweaks, sort of, like you need to steer a little bit, but you'll need to put all that upfront effort. And I guess, it's only human to not be very excited about having to do a lot of work that will not pay off immediately.
Yeah, or as well, yeah, for sure. Like, or as well, it's, again, so many avenues you could go down. What are some real simple things that that you can do. I know myself personally, whenever I'm faced with a vague a project with a goal, but no concrete steps on how to get there, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. There's some good resources. Let's talk about some specifics here.
Okay. So first thing I want to do before we go into specifics, actually, is go back to the point you made earlier, which I think is really important, right? We need to, I think, start from what is Google trying to do with search and search results, right? And what should be your approach to things? Because you were saying earlier that really all you need to do is help Google do its job, right? Which is present the best results for, basically match information with the people looking for it. That's all Google cares about.
Absolutely. It wants to present you, the searcher, with the most helpful resource possible to that query that you've typed in. And that is the mindset that you, when you're thinking about search engine optimization, should be taking, right? What is the intent behind this search? And how can I best help answer that question, that intent? That's the basics of it.
Yeah, because back in the day, and I mean like maybe 10 years ago or something, and people who will go into SEO will sort of come across these terms. There used to be a lot of people trying to essentially game Google, right? There were lots of people who thought, they were like, okay, let me figure out how Google ranks stuff, and let me sort of back engineer from there what I need to do to basically game Google to put my results on top of search pages. But then people realize that Google is just a little bit too smart for that, and it's getting a lot smarter, right?
Absolutely. And this is why they put out all these updates, right? Usually the Google updates are saying, I mean, here's a great example. Like way back in the day, you used to do what was called keyword stuffing, right? Where you'd say, oh, I want to rank for fast 5K or something. So you just go in and you'd make sure you wrote fast 5K or different variations of that term, 20 times on a page. And it creates a terrible page that is an awful user experience, and it creates grammar that is not written the way that people speak or read. And yeah, it worked for a short period of time, created some awful websites out there. But yeah, Google makes an adjustment, and their adjustments continue to be, is this useful? So things they're looking at, is the content on the page relevant to that query? Like it actually, it does go through the text, but not in a way where it's like, what are these words on the page? Is that exact word repeated an X amount of times? It doesn't do that. It would more look at when a person clicks onto your website, did they stay for a little bit of time and actually read what's going on? Or did they click on your website, instantly leave, and then click on the next result? That would tell it that the next result might be more relevant. Did they click through on your site, either to another page within the site or off to an external link? Like, so, in our case, people are typically coming through into our race calendar. They say they're searching for, I don't know, Dallas runs or something. Then they're finding a run page on our site, and then they're clicking off to that run. We give people an external or an executive summary rather of the race, and then we want them to go to the official race website where the best information is going to be. So Google sees that chain and it goes, oh, okay, I think that was probably a useful experience, and it will reward people's sites for that.
Exactly, which is why it's completely impossible and just a waste of time to try to basically game Google. It's just, it works now. What you were referring to there, which is their this thing they introduced a couple of years ago, the rank brain algorithm, which is, artificial intelligence. And, Google does artificial intelligence better than anyone else. It does exactly as you say. So, Google doesn't have to figure out from the words on your website whether it was helpful. It can see what people are doing, right? So basically Google says, okay, someone's looking for a fast 10K. I think that result from, Vancouver Marathon is going to be helpful. Let me put it up there. And people don't click on it, or they click on it and then they immediately go back, or they click on it and they don't spend any time and they move on. And then Google figures out just from that I don't need to know what the page says. Actually, all I need to know is that serving that result to that visitor for that query didn't get them the answer they wanted.
Yep. Absolutely. And you can do things that kind of help Google make those initial decisions, right? Where you're looking at setting up something like a title tag or a meta tag on the site. For people who don't know what that is, that would be basically a page title, and this is something called a meta title that you can manually apply onto the page that just says what is this all about. So a practical example for a race director would be your main page is typically the year of your event and then your event title and perhaps one or two of your main distances. Then you have your meta description. Again, some very simple 1 or 2 sentences about what it's about. Again, this is going to be not like a stuffed thing that says keyword distance, blah, 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 but an actual executive summary of what people hope to see. And then for each section of the site, kind of like adding that stuff in just to give Google a little bit of a head start. And then it's going to take a look at that, and it's going to take a look at how people behave on your page. And it's going to go, all right, is what you're saying what you're actually delivering? If yes, let's reward you. If not,
Yeah. And actually, it's not at all unheard of. In fact, it's quite common for Google to not even use the description that you prescribe in your page sometimes, right?
Oh, yeah.
If it's irrelevant, if it's misleading, if Google feels that there's other content on the page that is more relevant to that query, it would show that. The same way that basically on your Gmail or something, you see the subject of the email and then a little bit under it, which tells you sort of like, what the email might be about. Google, when it shows you the search results, it will try to pull out of that page the bit that was relevant. So if someone, for instance, searches for fast 10K, if it's not on your description, but it's somewhere else on the page, it will take out that paragraph and show it as part of the search results to show you where your query is in context.
For sure, 100%. And this is where I'm gonna jump a little bit ahead in this because this is very relevant. This is where having things like an FAQ section can be so beneficial to an event, because people that are kind of long tail searching, and by that I mean you have what we call the long tail in search. Is you have a small percentage of keywords that are going to make, or a small percentage of high value keywords, largely search for keywords that are going to make up a certain portion of traffic. So marathon or something, right? Very, very competitive keyword. If you're trying to rank for marathon, it probably gets a ton of search volume, but they're going to be it's going to be a small percentage of your overall traffic. What you're going to see is all of these smaller, lower volume keywords that actually make up a ton of traffic that you can capture. Marathon in May, marathon in British Columbia, that is fast, like weird things like that. And so one of the things that you can do, because as you're saying, Google is scanning your site and trying to pull some relevant information and show that as a bit of a preview to people, is having like an FAQ that would answer common questions about either your race or something that's very close. One good example might be, how far is the Vancouver Marathon? That's kind of a weird example. What is the fastest Vancouver Marathon time? Sort of things like that, or other sort of questions. And you can kind of figure out what those are by doing a bit of keyword research and through some trial and error, and form these FAQ sections on your site that are like genuinely helpful to people. And what is the elevation of the Vancouver Marathon? Vancouver Marathon is getting a lot of love on our examples today. Maybe
That's okay. That's
switch
okay.
it up to another race. It's just familiar to me because it's
sure. It's a Canada flavored episode today.
Yeah. So building something like that allows you to present some other information in a helpful way and allows you to potentially rank for some of these long tail queries from people.
Yeah, and actually FAQs is something that we're going to talk a little bit more about later in the podcast. I agree. It's a total goldmine for long tail keywords and just natural type of content that would be helpful for people. And to your example, to be honest, you shouldn't even want to rank for a keyword like marathon, right? What does someone typing in marathon, what does that mean? They're looking for the oil company. They're looking for like the history of the marathon. What are they looking for? They're not looking for your site. They're not looking for your race to enter. So you shouldn't worry about that.
Exactly.
So let's put a few kind of like terms and stuff, because, hopefully when people are going to be moving on from this episode and trying to further educate themselves on SEO and take this to the next level, they may want to be familiar with, some ways that SEO is discussed out there in content. So they should look for the right stuff. So first term that comes up quite a lot is so-called technical SEO. So do you mind telling us a little bit about what that is?
For sure. I mean, the way I see technical SEO these are things that you can do to the actual code of your website in order to tell the search engine spiders. And so, when I say like a search engine spider, basically Google, and I'm going to keep referring to Google because it's really about 90% of the search out there. Sure. So you want to optimize for Google and then figure the rest will kind of follow. But it's going out there and it's literally sending these robots out there called search spiders, and it just looks at every single site in the entire internet, and then they gather information from that, and then they try to figure out what the site's about, and then they present it in search results, and then then decide whether it's relevant or not, and they bump it up and down. But for me, technical SEO is anything you're doing to the actual code of your site to help aid those search engine spiders in their journey.
Right. And that sort of technical SEO strictly kind of excludes the content itself. It's about more like sort of like the wiring and the infrastructure that then helps the content be more easily digestible by those Google bots.
Absolutely. That was a fantastic description.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Which then takes us on to the next familiar term to technical SEO, which I think technical SEO sort of belongs, which is on-page SEO. So what is that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, on-page SEO, again, is manipulating the content on your site, the actual stuff people are seeing. Like, what sort of text do you have up there? Do you have a map? Any of that, and how are you arranging that so that it is the most useful experience for people? What does your navigation look like? Do you have a section for race results and photos, or is this just like, is that not even on your site?
And then beyond that, of course, that people might be surprised to hear exists is off-page SEO. So you can even do stuff for SEO that has nothing to do, that doesn't take place within your website, right? And that's things like what?
I mean, the off-page SEO, I think for events is one of the best things you can be doing. And this is, how can you use other sites that are ranking well for the keywords that you are after to drive traffic back to you? I mean, link building is, in my opinion, one of the best things you can be doing there. So yeah, again, this is looking at other sites that are not, it's not your website. They're ranking well for things. How can you use that to get traffic back?
I mean, we're going to touch on that a little bit later when we discuss backlinks and backlinking strategies and all that. But do you mind giving us like a quick preview into the whole concept of page juice, as it's referred in the industry?
I mean, it's really, this is like the internet's, what would you call this? Almost like the internet's vetting system or referral system. But essentially what Google does is it says, okay, how many other sites are linking back to your site? And what are those sites that are linking back to you about? If you are a race and you have a whole bunch of running directories, or maybe a whole bunch of run bloggers or sporting news sites linking back to you, then your race is probably pretty relevant. And the search engines will reward that. If you have a whole bunch of spam sites linking back to you, it's going to say, I don't give a lot of credibility to these links. So that is, we call that link juice. So that is more or less how that works.
Yeah, it's like the juice, that value of authority between sites, sort of like, trickles down between one site to the next through links, kind of thing.
Exactly. There's another metric there that we look at called PageRank, and really, again, this is Google's way of attributing some significance to a site. So, the higher the PageRank, the more of an authority that that site has.
Exactly, which means, not to sort of preempt the discussion we're going to have in a few minutes, but which means that, getting one link, from instance, back to your website from the New York Times, say, can be worth, like 1,000 links from much, much lower ranked and lower authority websites.
Absolutely.
Let's take a quick look at technical SEO, which we said was basically everything that happens on your page that doesn't have to do with content, just the wiring and the stuff, the way your website is set up. What kinds of things within technical SEO should people be aware of and mindful of and try to improve about their website?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at technical SEO, the first things I tend to look at are the page structure of the website. So what pages do you have on your site? What is the hierarchy there? And by that, I mean, you probably have a main homepage. Then under that, it's going to be linking off to a couple other pages. What do those pages have on them? What are the meta titles, meta descriptions of those pages? And are your pages linking back to each other? Again, thinking of this in the journey that these search engine spiders are taking through. Can it easily get to all of those pages? And then, are all the pages on your site, do they actually exist? Or are you linking off to like a bunch of dead pages that have no content? These are kind of some of the things that I start to look at the very top level, which, again, for most people who are producing events, it's pretty easy, right? Like you just want to have a few pages that have your most relevant content that people are looking for. And you want people to be able to easily navigate to those pages. The second area that I look at, and this is almost like a more advanced technique, is to start to tell the search engine spiders what some of the actual data is by doing what's called marking it up and actually saying, hey, this is a date, this is a location.
I mean, we'll get into markup, which is, I think, probably one of the most important things you can do about your SEO. But just on what you were saying about site structure and linking and stuff, I think it's fair to say that the same concept that we discussed a minute ago about link juice and how basically that propagates and grants importance in Google's eyes to different pages also holds true of your own website, basically. So pages that are close to your homepage, they receive more visibility in terms of how Google views it, right? And if you have a page that is like 5 links removed from your web page, Google is going to naturally categorize as like a lesser page to rank, basically.
Yeah, it will to some degree for sure. So like at the most basic level, it does look, often websites are going to look like an org chart, right? You've got your one sort of main thing, and then it kind of trees out from there. And it will naturally assume that your global homepage is probably the most important page. But you sometimes will find that some of the other pages end up being quite significant based off of what people are searching for. But you are right. Like it initially, a page that is maybe 3 degrees removed from another page might not be seen as significant to the user. And again, for race directors, I personally wouldn't overthink this section. This stuff is certainly important for someone like myself who has a directory site. I paid a lot of attention to the hierarchy initially, thinking, okay, we've got the Run Guides homepage, then we've got a race calendar for a city, and then we may actually want to have a race calendar of specific distances in a specific city or region. And then we actually have a event page, which is an executive summary of the event. And how does, there is a hierarchy there. For a race director, I mean, your site's not going to be that large usually, probably 10 pages or less. You can do it in like 5 pages even.
And do you think for a website like that, which I agree, generally race websites are fairly contained, that sitemaps, for instance, is something to worry about?
For a small site like that, I wouldn't worry about it too much, to be honest. So a sitemap is literally a list of all the pages on your site that you are. It's often, if you're using WordPress or something like that, it's pretty much auto generated and that's sent into the search engines. However, you can modify those, or you can manually submit them to the search engines and say, hey, here's a list of all the pages on my site. I'm just making it really easy for you to find all of those. Someone like myself, who we have, I don't even know, probably 10,000 pages on the site. We definitely submit a sitemap, and we go through that and go, are we submitting everything? Are we accidentally submitting things that we shouldn't be, that are kind of dead pages? So for someone like myself, it's definitely important. If you have a smaller website, I wouldn't stress about it too much. You're already getting that website indexed.
Yeah, another thing about that, and again, it's not super relevant to smaller websites like race websites, but it can be, I guess, in some cases, is that generally in terms of sitemaps and pages you submit, Google will sometimes not index some pages, and that goes also for race websites if they have very thin content, or they're kind of like admin type pages, your contact page, right, which only has a form or something like that, and you shouldn't hope to have those pages ranked, because they're not really relevant in terms of what you're trying to do with SEO.
Yeah, absolutely. It is good to identify some pages that you might actually not want to have ranked. You can check to see if they're ranked in Google by doing a search string where you go site : and then type in a URL, either just your root domain. By that I mean, with us it would be like site : runguides.com, or you could site : a specific page on your site, and if it is getting indexed, it will show up in those results. But yeah, there are times where there might be sections that you actually don't want to show because it's not useful content to people, or as you said, maybe it's what's called thin content, which is it just doesn't really have much on the page. An example, say with us, I'll just give you a practical example of some thin content we have, is we have pages that have runs in a specific region for a specific month, for a specific distance. Now, if you're looking for an 8K run in the month of November in Saskatchewan, you're probably not going to find much, if anything. So for me, I don't want that page necessarily ranking. It's much more useful, even if someone is searching for 8K in November in Saskatchewan. There are like 10 people out there that are searching for that. I would just rather put them to the main race calendar. And so we can either exclude that and tell Google, look, don't index this, or we can do what's called a canonical URL, and we can add that to the page. And that basically says to Google, actually, the content on this page is pretty much the same as the content on this other page that's more significant. So really, you want to treat the main /runs calendar page as the most relevant content for this weird November query. Send the person there, and that ends up ranking. The other one gets buried.
Right. Yeah, that's indeed what you do. This is not, I think, a problem most race directors would have with their websites. And actually, we should say to this point, because you mentioned WordPress, that a lot of the things we're going to be discussing now around technical SEO, if you have a website, like one of the websites, let's say, that are on Run Sign Up, where you can build your own website, or if you have a website, through Wix, WordPress, Squarespace, all of those website building platforms, you probably don't have to worry about a lot of these things, because those website builders are optimized for taking care of this, so long as you provide some information, like, as you said, like your page titles and descriptions and stuff. So if you have a website like that, the discussion we're going to get into in a minute about content and on-page stuff is going to be more relevant. But if you do actually have a website that sort of is either built from scratch, and even WordPress, because like there's a lot of things you need to set up on WordPress yourself. That's things you need to keep on top of. Sorry for interrupting myself here, but this is a really good point for me to tell you a little bit about Give Signup, Run Signup's free websites. We were just talking, weren't we, about website builders like Wix and frameworks like WordPress you can use to build a race website from scratch fairly easily, perhaps in the case of WordPress with the help of a developer. Well, you know what's even better than that? Building your website on Give Signup, Run Signup for free. With WordPress and platforms like Wix, it's going to cost you a few $100s per year maybe to build and maintain your site. With Give Signup, Run Signup, you can build an awesome, customizable, purpose-built race website for absolutely nothing. All this stuff we're talking about here on Technical SEO, your Give Signup, Run Signup website can do out of the box. Your website will automatically pull in all key details about your event, like your race's name, date, and location, and that's to ensure potential participants and Google can always find your event details. You can also customize your website to match your event branding and colors, add or remove pages, and build the whole site in minutes using the point-and-click tool. And, best of all, obviously, the whole website is optimized for getting people to sign up for your race, which no WordPress or Wix theme can do for you. So, my advice is, when you have a sec, head over to runsignup.com, that's runsignup.com, and just check out some of the race websites though, just to get an idea of the different looks you can achieve and how awesome your website could look. And I'll leave it at that. Now, let's get back to the episode. Next up, very important part of SEO this, using structured data to earn more real estate for your website on Google search results pages. So let's move on to structured data and markup, which is one of my favorite and most valuable parts of technical SEO, right? You were saying earlier about marking up your event. Do you want to elaborate on that?
For sure. And I mean, for us at Run Guides, this was actually one extremely significant thing that we did. But and this is a great thing for race directors as well. You have a bunch of information on your page, right? A bunch of text, some images, possibly a map, things like that. And what you can do by marking up this data is you can tell Google exactly what type of information that is. You can say, this is a date, this is a distance. Now, the benefit to that is Google will often then display that data in a slightly more different, and by that I mean you're going to get a whole lot more real estate way in search results. This is often referred to as a rich snippet, and you will often kind of see this, when you do a Google search, and then above the search results, and I can't remember if it's above or below the ads, but you'll have just a gigantic box, maybe with a thumbnail image preview, maybe with some sort of date or location information that looks completely different, and it really stands out. And if you can score those spots, I mean, that's a ton of clicks. So marking up your data is a way for you to explain to the search engines, hey, this is a date, and it gives you a chance to rank in those rich snippets. They aren't guaranteed at all. They just kind of randomly appear sometimes for some searches, and they will randomly disappear as well. And there doesn't seem to be any kind of rhyme or reason behind it. That at least that I know of. So if you do, please let me know. But the way that you can do that is you can use something called the Google Structured Data Markup Helper tool. And I'm hoping this is actually what it's called. And you plug in your website into this tool. And I'm hoping we'll have some show notes or whatever so we can put links to all these tools
Absolutely.
that we talk about after, because these are all free tools that anyone can use. So you have the Google Structured Data Helper Markup tool. They need to acronym that. You pull up your website, and then you literally just like highlight chunks of it, and then you say, this is a date, this is a distance. It then gives you a piece of code that you can paste into the site, and if you're using WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, any of that, that's usually pretty straightforward to do. Plug that in there. There you go. your structured data is now on your site, and you're helping the search engines understand what's going on. For races, so for myself as a directory site, this is very, very important. For a race, one really fantastic practical example of how this is important is, where's your start line? And where's your race actually located? And if you have the address of the start line, what this does is it gives one location-based indicator to the search engines on where you're located. And that does, that it's a small little thing, but that gives you an opportunity to potentially rank for a location-based generic distance keyword in your region. And that person who's looking for a local 5K, local 10K, half marathon or whatever, now you have a slightly better chance of finding that person.
Exactly. I think that is absolutely key, right? I think, race directors being in the business of putting on events, you should at the very least, and we'll go through a few different types of markup you could do, but you should be at the very least marking up the race on your website as an event. So there's a special type of markup you would do to basically, as you say, tell Google that I am describing an event here. And that's the date of the event, and that's the location of the event, and also that's the logo of the event, and also that's where you can get tickets for the event. That can be helpful. And then Google takes all of that, and rather than showing just a generic page result, which you said very, very astutely there with the real estate, it expands that and it says, this is an event result, not a generic page result. This is an event. That's when the date is. That's how you can get to, that's where the location is and everything. And just to expand a little bit on what you said there about, which is also extremely true and helpful, the location side of things, or even the start date of your event. When someone goes in, and says, find me, I'm looking for a marathon near Vancouver in November. If you haven't marked up your event, who might be a marathon near Vancouver in November, right, with the location and the date, Google will have a very hard time bringing your page as part of the results to the user who's looking for that, because they don't know. I mean, you have a date on your website, you have some location, but they can't figure out that all these things come together into an event. Whereas if that's all there, whenever someone searches for marathon near Vancouver in November or whatever, and your result matches the November and the Vancouver, you have a good chance of actually appearing in those results.
Absolutely.
And the other thing, actually, which I just tried before we came on air, is that, lots of people I saw, speaking of keywords that we're going to go into in a minute, because again, people who search Google, the other thing is they don't necessarily know how search works and Google works, and, use all of those, as you were saying earlier, all those site colon and all of those fancy ways of searching more smartly, right? They just type whatever they think is going to get them back their query. And you see some queries which are Boston qualifying races near me.
Near
right?
me?
Well, really talk about the near me. Talk about the near me bit.
Yeah, this is really one of the biggest trends in search in the last couple of years, is people switched from searching Boston qualifier marathons in wherever to near me. You're on your phone and you're 5K near me. 5K near me is one of the highest searched for keywords in general, running, that there is right now. And yeah, that and how does Google figure out what is near you? It's looking at geolocations and it's looking at structured data. And so it's such an easy, that one's a fairly, I think, quick and easy win for people. Again, if you have a map with an actual embedded map, or even just an address written on there, you're good. You're that's 80% of the battle. But then you can get that bonus round by marking up that data. So yeah,
I think if you have your site listed on runguides.com or other race calendars, as many people do and should do, you guys who run Run Guides and the other race calendars, you do a great job of marking up this stuff. And, probably when someone goes into Google to do that search query, they'll get back one of your results. But it would be great for race directors if their website was coming up. So it comes up on top of all of these results.
Absolutely. And I mean, and you know, hopefully it does. Like I don't want to be outranking race directors for their own websites. We want people to be coming to the site and then clicking off to them, because at the end of the day, they're going to have the most useful information. Like we've got an executive summary, but you're the one that's going to be able to sell your event, get those people onto your email list, where you can then convert them into runners.
We mentioned the event markup, basically, you know, going in and marking up an event. What other types of kind of like information do you think would be helpful for people to think about marking up on their website besides just the events?
Honestly, I think that would be more or less what I would focus on if I was a race director. I would just focus on that, a simple like date, distance, location, register, and mark that up. And you're probably good at that point.
If a website has an FAQ section, marking that up as an FAQ adds anything to it, or would Google just discover stuff sort of on its own?
Thank you for that. That is one that I absolutely missed. Yes, your FAQs, you can mark things up as questions, and that is a fantastic way to rank for things. So yes, definitely mark up the FAQs as well.
Because questions, people may have noticed, is another kind of like special thing you get in search engine results pages, right? You have, even if you look for any kind of query, there's always a little people ask for kind of like tab there that has questions that people ask for, which link to specific sites. And those rank pretty high on the page.
Absolutely. And that is, I mean, you've probably noticed that if you type in anything, you usually get that markup of a whole list of questions underneath your search query. And you just expand it. You can go through a ton of different questions there. So that is another gigantic trend. I can't believe I almost missed this. This is like bad that I almost missed the FAQ. It's another major trend. People looking, searching, changing their searches through from, you know, location, whatever, to near me. People are asking questions into Google. There's actually a fantastic book I read a number of years ago, and I can't quite recall what it was, but people are extremely honest too in Google. So they're not afraid to ask what they think might be a dumb question, because no one's judging them. And you can get like that. And so this book talks about what people actually search for. But yeah, you as a race, you as an event, marking that up, saying, hey, this is an FAQ section. These are questions and answers. Excellent way to score some really cheap and easy, rich snippets.
And actually, as we wrap up now the discussion on technical SEO, what you were saying earlier about real estate, I think it's important for people to understand why Google is a little bit like a winner-takes-all kind of thing, and why basically, you know, although you can have like, you know, 10 pages of results, really most of the action happens at the top of the first page, right? I think I read a statistic somewhere that basically the first result on Google, the top result, gets something like, you know, a third of the clicks of everything. And then maybe if you're like the first result on page 2, you get maybe like 1% or something, right?
Oh yeah, it's something crazy like that. And you know, we'll see it for keywords that we're going after, where we'll kind of have low traffic, and all of a sudden, oh, okay, wow, something must have increased there, and we'll go cross-reference with our rankings, and it's like, oh yeah, we went from number 9 to number 2 or number 3, and it really is, you know, those top few results are driving the vast majority of the traffic.
Yeah, which also makes it really important then when you're doing your SEO and you're doing all this work, hopefully to improve the rankings of your site, that if you had to spend time, for instance, between, you know, moving a result for a keyword, you know, from position, you know, like 25 to position, like, you know, 15, that's not going to move as much the needle as moving a result from like 7 or 8 to top 3.
Totally. Absolutely.
Okay. So moving on to content 101 about any of your pages is having a good title and a good description. And what does that mean exactly? What makes for a good title and a good description, both technically and in terms of content?
Yeah, I mean, it's really short, descriptive. Like this is an executive summary. If I was to tell you, ask you, what is this page about? Can you tell me in 20 words or less? Is it actually what your page is about? That makes typically a good title. That said, it is wise to think of user intent around some of the keywords that you might be going after and make sure that it answers those things. If someone is looking for half marathons in Portland, is your page title Portland Half Marathon Calendar? And is your description find upcoming half marathons in and around Portland? Like that would be a good title and good description. For races, do you have a page of results? Do you have a page of photos? Does it have a very simple executive summary of what that's about? And is it relevant to the user query? That's more or less it.
And then if for the main bit of a race website, which I guess for most people is describing the race, right? Saying a few things about the race. Maybe you'll mention your prizes and your swag and all of that stuff, basically, right? What should you think about there to make that part of the content as valuable in drawing in the right crowd as possible?
Yeah, I mean, with this is where it kind of gets a bit funny. Like, I would focus more on answering the questions that the user might have in a natural way. And I wouldn't overthink trying to make it super specific. Like when people come to your race website, what are they looking for? Date, distance, register, course, swag, some cool photos, and a very simple executive summary about what this race is. Is it a Boston qualifier? Is it fast and flat? Is it really, does it have a whole bunch of vert? That is what I would focus on doing. And I personally would tend to focus on short descriptions, like videos, if possible. They're going to quickly answer those questions. And I try to avoid what I call like fluff, which would be, come check out this super awesome, amazing, exciting time. This will be the best day of your life, blah, 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 blah. It's like, that doesn't tell me anything. I want to know what the race is about. And that's what I would focus on. Because again, now you're thinking more user experience. What is this person trying to do when they come to your website?
Mm-hmm. And moving on to keyword research, how can I inform the text and the content in what I write with the kinds of things that people are looking for? Because, like before we had this discussion and someone listened in, maybe they didn't realize that highlighting flat or something or Boston Marathon qualifier or something would help them draw in more people. So how should they do the research to be able to write an effective bit of content on the site?
So you can do some basic, what's called keyword research, which is finding out what people are actually searching for, when they're out there on Google. You can do that a few ways. So you can use tools like Google Keyword Tool, which is a free tool that is part of Google AdWords, the platform that they use to run ads. You do need to have an AdWords account, but you do not need to be spending any money on AdWords. And what you're doing there is you are plugging in a couple sort of what would be called like a broad keyword. Maybe it's like 5K races or whatever, marathons in Vancouver, and it will give you a whole bunch of ideas on, this is kind of stuff that people are searching for. And from there, you can kind of narrow it down and just see if there are any trends or any kind of, they call them baskets, but like groups of similar keywords. So you can use a tool like that. You can use a tool called Google Trends, which shows the volume of keyword searches, and it scores it off of 100. So if you were to say type in like 5K runs, at one period of time during the year, that'll have a score of 100, and that's like the period of time where it has the highest frequency of search. And again, it gives you a few ideas and suggestions there as well, and it will even do it regionally, which is kind of cool. Additionally, you can use something called Google Search Console, and this one's pretty cool. Search Console is kind of this platform that helps you measure like the health of your site, what's actually going on, a lot of the technical elements of it. But it does show you what searches your website shows up for and how many clicks you're getting for the website, for your site as well. And that's a fantastic tool because you will see your site ranking. And, I don't know how deep they go, it's pretty deep. Like, maybe you're ranking on the 5th page, as long as you're delivering some sort of impression. And, people there'll be enough people that kind of, I don't know, scroll through to bring it up. But you'll now see, oh, hey, I didn't know that people were searching for this. That's kind of interesting. Maybe that could be relevant. So those are a few of the free tools that you can use. I also use a tool. This one's paid. They may offer a free plan for if you're kind of a lower traffic website. I can't quite recall, but it's a tool called Moz, M-O-Z, and they have some built-in keyword research stuff in there as well.
So Google Search Console, I think, is something that everyone who has a website should be signed up for. It's basically your kind of like command center for all your organic SEO, like anything that has to do with Google and how it understands your site, it's there. So it will tell you when a page is throwing an error, when it's not rendering correctly, on mobile or whatever, when it's being very slow. It will give you all the traffic numbers for your website by page. It will not always tell you all of the queries that because it's a little bit of a it's sort of like the golden goose. So it won't exactly tell you every single query that gets people to your site, but it will show you the largest queries. And from that, as you were saying, you can sort of start thinking, okay, if people searching these terms come to my website, what other terms could I optimize for? Or, how can I improve on a given term to move from position 12, which seems to be a very, very high volume query, to position 2, for instance, right?
Yep. And you may find opportunities where you are generating or appearing in a number of, you're throwing a lot of impressions. You're showing up a lot for a specific query, but your click-through rate, the percentage of time that people are clicking through to your website, is low. And so that tells you that their initial impression is you're not a very useful resource, especially if you have high impressions. That's one of the things I do is I go in there and I go, okay, let's look at high impressions with a low click-through rate. These are potential opportunities. They're not always an opportunity. Sometimes it's just simply going to be, something that you're ranking for some weird reason. Because then you might make a tweak. This is where you may decide to change the meta description or title on that page if it's applicable. And you could see your click-through rate triple on there. So that's definitely Search Console is so good. One other final way that you can do keyword research, which is pretty cool, is if you are running any Google ads, you can go back and see what keywords people used to trigger those ads. And you can then, and you'll often find there'll be some sort of questions, things like that. You can then go, oh, okay, cool. Maybe we're able to create some content for these search terms. Again, that's if you're running Google ads. It's also actually a great way to identify stuff that you don't want to rank for. Like we do a little bit of paid ads, and I found out that the term mayor is searched for a lot with the term race, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, of course. There's all these cities that are having election mayoral races. Like, oh, okay, let's make sure let's exclude that from our ads.
Yeah, and actually the interesting thing about all this is that everything that we mentioned here about keyword research is also very crucial to running Google ads, which is something we won't get into right now, but it's essentially sort of like the same gateway. You need to understand what keywords you want to go after, which is sort of part of this.
And again, keeping in mind that this is all about you're going to see a whole bunch of, you're going to get a basket, a list of keywords that have various search volumes. You're going to see your site throw in impressions for a bunch of different keywords. what you should be taking from all of this, and when you're talking about your on-page stuff, is you're going, okay, what is this person's intent? What are they trying to do? And how can I make sure that my content serves the best answer to that? And again, for a lot of events, simply having your most basic information prevalent on the page with very simple, well-written executive summary content. And it's having certain subpages for some of the most highly searched for things. The next phase in that would be creating, Google calls it like 10x content, or you could call it like evergreen content. But that's where you want to start thinking of, okay, well, what are specific pieces of content that I could create that would be high value beyond the basics of date, distance, location, register button, that people might find really, really interesting over a long period of time, that could also have the potential to be shareable. So for example, if you find, like, everyone searches for races and results, right? Like that's like what people do. So, okay, what useful content can I create on my website, on my event website, that is useful beyond just here are last year's results and an archive of the results? Well, what about like all-time results or interesting results across different categories? And that now forms the basis of an article that you can have on there that, has the potential to be really interesting content that doesn't take you much time to ever update again in the future. But yeah, I mean, what is the fastest time ever run in the Vancouver Marathon? Who did it? That's some interesting content that, again, this is skipping ahead to the off-page stuff, but that can get shared around, and that can help you rank for keywords through other websites that are ranking for those sort of keywords.
That's interesting. I wanted to talk about that a little bit later, but I think that's probably the right time to get into this. So writing content, lots of people do it, particularly, like WordPress owners or people with like an off the shelf kind of like already built website where there's no additional effort to have a blog or something. They're thinking, yeah, I'll add a blog to my race. And obviously some people write posts, that are quite ephemeral, and, they're about, this week we did this, or, like price increase. And then they share that through their mailing list, which is fine. But what do you think of what is called sort of like a content marketing strategy for races? Basically building a blog, building content just to get people through to your website. Do you think that works? It's a good investment of resources?
I do. I think it's. I think if done certain ways, it can be extremely, extremely valuable. And I think you should focus on, again, creating evergreen content, stuff that's going to be timeless in a sense, and that may not really involve much effort to update. Here's a great example. You could do an article about the archives or shows images of every single race medal from the start of your race up until today. It's interesting to people. It's neat. They want to go back and see, what was the 1970 race? What did that look like? What did that race medal look like? And how long does that take you to update after you've kind of done it?
Could that work as content that draws in qualified users to your website? So like for the piece that you mentioned there, what kind of like journey or query would take someone back to that post?
Yeah, I mean, in that particular example, the way that I would use that content would be to then connect with so in Vancouver here, for example, we have the Daily Hive, which is kind of the what's going on in the city blog, like really, really popular, tons of traffic. And that is amazing content to feed over to them, to then push out in there, hey, this is some upcoming events, but here's a cool look back at some of the city's history in regards to running. And, you're casting a little bit of a broader net there. However, you are now getting people engaged who may think, and especially, with running, like the vast majority of people, I'd say, are likely doing, maybe one or two races a year. And they have, I mean, of course you have people that run again and again and again, but a huge chunk of your participants are almost like one-offs, right? Like they're going to do a 10K and then that was their life goal, and they're good for a while. They might do another one. So something like that, interesting, engaging content to the average kind of person who may want to do one race, they're now going to go, neat. Now that's what I might be thinking about as far as like doing an upcoming race. And you've gotten some exposure, and that article that sure, it's on your site, but something like the Daily Hive is going to rank a lot better for just like random like run medals or runs with medals, something like that query, which is definitely a query that people search for quite a bit. You now have a ranking opportunity for that. So that would be user goes, runs with medals, finds this article either on your site or through Daily Hive and goes, oh, neat, that's kind of cool, checks you out. At least you now have some exposure. And that's going to sit there forever, and it's going to take you 10 minutes a year to update.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. So I didn't think of the runs with medals type of thing. I always keep underestimating how important medals are for runners out there. Yeah, they just come up everywhere, right? Basically, yeah, you have a good medal, or you do something around medals, and people are gonna look for it.
I have an issue, which is I have some old race medals that they're kind of like they're just sitting around, right? And I don't know what to do with them. I always thought it would be fun to just melt them down into one big super medal.
That'd be interesting.
Find a smelter. We still might do this. We wanted to do a promo where just like kind of a dumb thing that I do because I have too much time on my hands sometimes, where we wanted to solicit extra medals from runners across North America, melt it down into the world's largest medal, and then just like throw a race. And if you win, if you're in the race, you get one ballot, and someone will draw one, and if you win, you get the world's largest medal. We'll ship it to you.
The super medal.
The super medal created out of all the unwanted old race medals.
Wow.
Another practical use of, say, evergreen content would be training guides as well, but specifically to regions, right? Like how to train to run a race in city, or how to train to run a 10K in Pittsburgh, right? Like there will be some idiosyncrasies about the specific regions. Maybe there's specific areas of town that are really great to run in, something like that. I mean, this is again going to potentially get you that person who goes, oh yeah, I want to just look for some good run training routes in and around this city. Oh wow, here's this guide that's branded and put out by the specific race. Very cool. And again, this is fantastic content to share with other sites who are authorities in your region that are already ranking well for generic event-based content. And again, like things to do in May, things to do in June. So not quite run specific, but people that are looking for stuff to do. And now you're offering them some valuable content there.
Yeah, that's super helpful, because I was about to say that, for me, the biggest waste of time is going on race websites and seeing every different race website have a blog post on a 5K training plan, which is not going to rank in a million years, right? As a generic 5K plan. But as you say, if you put the local routes, the local angle to it, yeah, you'll definitely get the right kind of crowd through.
Absolutely. And again, this is content that will definitely take some effort to put together. But once you've created it, it exists, and it doesn't really take too much to tweak it year to year.
Super. Yeah, that's all really helpful on content. And I think we've started sort of segueing into off-page stuff. So, like getting backlinks and getting, like authoritative sites to link back to your website and thus increase your authority in Google's eyes. What do you think should be a backlink building strategy that makes sense for someone who runs a race?
Yeah, I mean, for someone who runs a race, and I'll preface this by saying the backlinking strategy. So this is getting links on other websites that are ranking really well for keyword terms that you may be after, or user intent that you may be after. And in your case, as an event producer, this is often websites that are focused on upcoming events in and around the city. This is going to be a bit of a long game and something that is kind of going to be ongoing. But the way that that I approach this when we're doing our own backlink research is I just start by doing some Google searching around for some keywords. You know, I've done some keyword research, or again, I don't overthink this stuff. I'll just go, okay, if someone is looking for, you know, if I'm an event producer and someone's looking for upcoming events, what would they type in? Okay, let's just start searching around. And here are some suggestions that Google gives me for searches. Let's click on all of those. And now I'm going to make a list of the sites that are ranking in the top 20 positions. If I think that there's a potential for me to get some content on them. And one of the really good ways to do this is, and this one you do need a tool for, like I use Moz.com, is you identify sites that are linking to either like competitors or similar events. Like try searching for some of the other similar runs to you, and maybe you find an article on a high value news site that happens to be talking about upcoming runs in a certain month, and you notice that they have someone else listed and that you're not listed. I mean, that's like so easy to message those people and say, hey, notice that you had this article about upcoming runs, and you had these guys included, and you know, we're hoping that we can get included too. So I do some Google searching. I see who is ranking for those keywords. And then you really have to one by one figure out, is there a way for me to add value to this other page and link back to my site as well? So because you know, you think of yourself as the other website owner. If I message you and just go, link to me, you're like, well, I don't know, man. Like, why? But if I can help you provide more value to people, then it's a win-win, right?
Yeah, and sometimes you'll find articles like list articles where it would make sense and it would add value to have your event listed alongside other events, right? Maybe it's a local website or a running club website. You know, I often go to running club websites which may be, you know, 2 or 3 years stale, and they don't have all the races, and my race might make sense to be part of those lists. I mean, it's not like, you know, I'm spamming anyone. I'm just asking you to improve the content on your site by including a relevant result.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a fantastic example, you know, right there. Like if think of like running clubs are the most hyper local directories that you can have, right? And that can be such an easy win to just message them and say, oh, hey, I noticed like some of this page content's outdated. Throw us on there. Again, going back to, you know, the start of this conversation, that's how you and I met. Is I noticed you had a resource page on your website that had some race directories, and reached out and said, oh, hey, like I noticed you have some directories. We also have a directory. Can you throw us up on the page? The easiest also too, I mean, the easiest links that any event producer is going to get, and some of the best links, and I'm not just saying this because I am a directory, are directories.
Absolutely.
We want, like, our mission in life is to help people find things, and it's free. I'm not sure about everyone. I'm pretty sure it's always free to get listed on directories. So yeah, like hit up the directories and get on there.
Exactly.
It's the easiest, highest value link you'll ever get.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of race directories, the article that you know, got us to sort of email is still up on our website, racedirectorshq.com. We have a list of the top 3 US race calendars and UK race calendars and international race calendars you can list your race on. It honestly is where you should start from, because race calendars, I mean, as you said, they're purpose built for that thing, right? So they have all the structured markup and everything, because they're there for people to look for events. And they also have the most qualified audience. They're almost like a mini Google for runners. That's where runners go to find events. So, you know, if your race is not there, it's it's just outright criminal.
and then the next level is your just your local event sites as well, right? So yeah, here in Vancouver, like Daily Hive is a great example. I know, like, I think it's BlogTO in Toronto. Every city has one, right? Every city has that one. Here's what's going on, one or two, and making sure that you've messaged them to get included on their, hey, this is what's going on post. Because additionally, they're putting them up often as a static page on their site, but that's going out to their social channels, their email lists, things like that. So I think those are really quick and easy wins. And then the next level is looking at some more kind of robust content. And when I say that, I mean, you're looking at a site and you're going, okay, this site ranks really well for ways to get fit in the summer. And what sort of value can I add to this post? Could I give them a little extra paragraph to add in there, or some insight? Can I ask them if they're going to do a future post? And if so, I'd love to be quoted, or love to provide them a link to this, run training in Vancouver article. Like, and that's really where you have to get a bit creative, right? And you just have to think, what is content that I can provide to these people, these other websites, that they would be interested in and give value to their users.
Yeah, and back to the example, the really interesting example you mentioned earlier about, doing like local training plans or local running routes or something. You can hit up any number of generic, health and wellness, lifestyle type publications, which always try to do content of, you can do this in your area to keep fit, or that, or whatever, and tell them to include a link back to your race. And if it is a 5K, 10K race, particularly, it's the perfect kind of like entry distance event that most of these people may choose to enter after a point.
Understanding too how they're distributing their content can help you a lot. Like, this, we're talking about search engine optimization, but let's say, are these other websites, do they have email lists? Are they sending things out? Again, that can be, I'll use the local running routes, local training example. If they're sending out emails, often websites that do that a lot, especially local, what's going on directory sites, are desperate for content. And you can say, well, hey, I noticed you're sending out emails, or it looks like it because you have an opt-in. Here's a great piece of content that you can include in one of your upcoming emails. And then that like direct links back to you. So now they're going to send that out to their email list, hopefully generate some traffic back to that page. Hopefully you provide a good user experience for the people that come onto there. That's going to help you potentially rank up for some of these longer tail keywords. And again, and I keep saying this, but like anything you do, anything you create there, think about, how is that helping improve someone's experience, or helping them address what they're actually searching for that's like relevant to my race?
So one other actually important thing before we move off race calendars and listing sites is the benefit you get when you actually have things like reviews on those websites, right? And I think it's a dual benefit. Both the words of the reviews, right, give you some long tail keywords and people talking about, oh, awesome medal or whatever, right, which may come into SEO. But also, if you have a listing on something like Run Guides, or I had the guys from Race Check and Race Raves a couple of episodes back, which are dedicated on building reviews, then you also get your event to show up on Google when those results come up with a little stars, like with a little 5 stars of the review, which is another type of markup that you don't have to have on your website, because you don't have reviews of your website on your website, but you can get people to review your site on listing sites and get the benefits of the review markup from those sites.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely do that, especially through like dedicated review sites. And I mean, I will say I am a huge advocate for putting some reviews and testimonials on your own site too. Just when you're looking at conversion optimization, like that creates social proof, right? And subtly having a couple of reviews that are specific to the type of runner experience that you want to offer is incredibly important and can really help a lot. If your course is known for having a ton of vert and being super tough, and people see a couple of reviews about your course having a ton of vert and being super tough, that's going to create that social proof in their mind, and that is going to help with your conversion rate.
Exactly. Last thing before we wrap up, and I think we touched on quite a few of these things now, is tools. So things that people can use for their SEO research and work. What would you recommend?
The tools that I would recommend would be your Google Search Console. That's going to allow you to easily examine the kind of healthier site and help you with some of the keyword research. You can additionally use the Google Keyword Tool. And this is in AdWords. And again, this is a free tool. You'll just need an AdWords account to go out and do a bit of basic keyword research in order to understand generally what people might be looking for. The other tool that I would look at for keyword research and trends would be Google Trends. And that will give you some suggestions. It will also allow you to kind of see when searches for specific baskets of keywords are going to peak. Then to do all your markup, I would look at the Google Structured Data Markup Helper tool. And that's going to, again, allow you to, tell the spiders what information is on your site. Like, is this a date? Is this an answer to a question? Things like that. The other tool that I really like is one called Moz, MOZ.com. And this is like probably the number one free resource for people looking to learn more about SEO. And I send this to people all the time. It is the Moz. It's called the Moz Beginner's Guide to SEO. And it walks people through everything from what is search engine optimization to all, like, really touches on all these points that we talked about and more today, much more eloquently than I'm able to do it on a podcast. And the Moz Beginner's Guide to SEO is like the best resource that I have found out there online. And it's just a series of articles. So that is something I would highly recommend to people as well. Then if you're starting to get a little bit more advanced into stuff, you want to start maybe really tracking your keyword rankings outside. Like, you can track them in Google Search Console, but if you want to do some more advanced tracking, or if you want to start doing things like looking at what pages are linking to your competitors, you can start to use some of these paid tools. Like Moz.com has a paid tool. Another very popular one is Ahrefs. A lot of my friends use that. I've looked into using
myself
them.
included.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I'm
a big fan.
Yeah, that's a great tool. It's essentially like Moz and Ahrefs are pretty much the same thing. They just offer you slightly different things for slightly different price points. So depending on what you want to do. Those are some great tools as well. I think for most race directors out there, I don't really necessarily think you have to go too crazy on that stuff. I think just doing some basic keyword research and using something like Google Search Console is going to give you a huge heads up. And definitely go over the Moz Beginner's Guide to SEO. And I use, like, people listening to this won't see it, but I'm doing air quotes over beginners. Here, I'll do them so you can see it in our video window. There's the air quotes. Because it is something that is easy to understand, but is applicable to all levels. And I reference that thing all the time. And they keep it quite updated as well on finding new SEO best practices.
Yeah, that's all really definitely stuff that people want to check out. And it really won't take all that much time. I think people really, race directors need to invest. They need to be a little bit smarter with SEO, I guess, right? I mean, it's not rocket science, particularly for a race website, but I think there's so much they can gain by just tweaking things a little bit in line with what we discussed. I would add two things here in terms of tools. I think for me, Google Search Console alone, again, if you have a website, you should have a Google Search Console account. Then beyond that, you know what? One interesting way that I do keyword research sometimes is just google.com, right? So you start typing in, like, first of all, you see what comes up in the queries that you're targeting, which is super helpful. Then at the bottom, Google has sort of like similar queries or people that, may have phrased things a little bit differently to how you phrase them, which is important for when you're tweaking your content. And then also one thing, and it also, I'm sure the Moz guide would have it, most people have it, is that when you actually start typing a query, let's say you start typing Vancouver 10K, and you stop there, you see all the autocomplete results that Google throws in that search query box. So basically, Google tells you what are the most popular queries that begin with London 10K, right? And that alone can inform you a lot about what you want to search for.
Absolutely. You've just described my entire link building research process right there. It is an absolute fantastic way to start looking for things. 100%.
And if I may add something to the Moz resources that I've also been through, and they're quite helpful. I'm also a huge fan of Backlinko resources. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not actually. No, I'm not familiar with that.
So backlinko.com was started by a guy called Dean something. Anyway, I think he's considered like the authority on backlinking and SEO and stuff. So he has tons of really, really, really in-depth articles. I mean, exhaustively in-depth. It's like 40-minute reads or something. But he's poured a lot of work and hard-earned experience into that stuff. So I think alongside Moz, which has an excellent beginner's guide, I would definitely recommend people checking out backlinko.com. So that's backlinko.com. Yeah, and I think between all of these things and a bit of time and perseverance, I think there's some good results in all of that if you want to decide to go down the SEO route.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, at the end of the day, it's just create content that's going to be really helpful for people and make sure that your site is easy to navigate. And then I think, again, for event directors, go over some quick wins on your backlinking, directory sites, other local what's going on event websites. Do a little bit of that. Do a little bit of quick Googling to see kind of what other people are searching for, and see if there are some lift style articles that you can quickly get your race on. Get an FAQ up on your website, and then mark up some of your data, especially date, distance, register, make sure Google knows that your website's about an event, and then mark up those FAQs. If you do that, you've done 75%, 80%. You've covered the basics. Like, I mean, there you go. There's an hour and a half podcast in 15 seconds.
Absolutely. That was a fantastic summary. And we actually needed that after an hour and a half. I think that's exactly the kinds of things that people want to focus on. Corey, it's been a pleasure. It's been a great hour and a half to be going over a topic that I also feel quite passionate about. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was I'm really glad we got to chat about this. That was great.
I'm sure we'll have more chances to chat, probably even back on the podcast. Thanks very much to everyone listening in, and we will see you all on the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode on SEO with my guest, RunGuide's media managing partner, Corey Jenneman. You can find more resources on anything and everything related to race directing on our website, racedirectorshq.com. You can also share your questions about building your own website, SEO, or anything else in our Facebook group, Race Directors Hub. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe or leave a review on your favorite player. And also check out the podcast back catalog for more great content like this. Until our next episode, take care and keep putting on amazing races.